So the question is, what do I do about my unbelieving spouse or partner? Right? Or biblically, I guess, opinionally, it doesn't really matter what we think. Biblically, what should I do about my spouse or partner?
Right? Who is an unbeliever?
Who is an unbeliever. And this is something that me and Stephanie have dealt with directly. My story's long and it's really, really complicated, and some time throughout maybe some of these videos or all of them, it'll get strung out through it. But before I was saved at the age of 30, I was voicing as an unbeliever atheist. I knew all the lingo of atheism, and I purported that ideology pretty like not a preacher of atheism, but that was what I had confirmed that I believed with out of anger towards God. So that's what Stephanie was dealing with for the first 7 years,
8 years, yeah,
of our relationship. Was a person bent on destruction, strung out on hard drugs, and a severe alcoholic with a very big anger problem, very low self-esteem, suffers from depression, anxiety, everything that goes with that sort of lifestyle. So that's what she was dealing with. And then,
so I think the first turning point in which I saw God play a part in our lives was when we got pregnant.
With our first child.
With our first child, yeah. Because I had voiced that I don't think I can do this. The first year was a really honeymoon puppy love. I was love at first sight, and I didn't know I definitely didn't know he was on drugs.
I was on drugs the whole time.
Yeah. But I knew that he was an alcoholic, but I didn't realize the severity of how bad of an alcoholic he was until years into our relationship. And so
she was not prepared in any way.
No.
From support on any angle with how to deal with this.
No. That is straight A, 3-sport athlete,
right.
Goody two shoes. And so anyways, so I when I started to realize, wow, he really has an alcohol problem, an anger problem, he likes to fight. I don't think that this is the person I'm supposed to be with. And then we found out we were pregnant with our first child, Hunter. And I want
to say this is the first instance where Stephanie was going to leave me, and then we were held together by something, because I wouldn't separate from my child. There was no option of abortion.
Right.
That was not ever in our vocabulary. And that's not saying that we're better than it. I just want to say that was not our option. That was not what was presented to us from either of our angles.
Right.
And I was not going to abandon Stephanie or my child in pursuit of alcoholism. Tragically, what I ended up doing was just tagging along with her and carrying all the alcoholism and drug addiction and all the turmoil that goes with that with our now new family.
Yeah. And so, in fact, when we found out I was pregnant, I cried, and he was joyful. He was excited. He was like, we're going to be okay. And I wasn't so sure, because I don't want to be with you. You have an alcohol problem. But I really felt God nudge at my heart and say, no, like, just watch, And so we got through it and had a beautiful baby boy, and, years passed and we were hanging on.
But the whole time, okay, so these years passed, and we refer to these as the dark years of Jesse and Stephanie's life. Okay, so it was bad. I'm not going to go into detail. It would take a very, very long time. The story is very, very intricate. There's a lot of details that we could cover in it. But so that's it wasn't. It's not like all of a sudden from that point something clicked because Hunter was born and I became a good guy. That's not what happened.
No, he continued to struggle with alcohol, and unbeknown to me, he was a meth user, and I didn't know that. Well, fast forward to I was gone in Iraq. He had moments of sobriety. You tried very hard on your own to,
and
to
with
be sober.
12-step programs and with AA and with NA, and I have my own gripe with those, and I go over that with some other time. But then, so you went to Iraq.
I went to Iraq. When I got home, well, Iraq almost broke him. I mean, he was,
because at this point I was falling apart. My life was falling apart. My life was terrible. I was looking at the fact that I was 20-something-year-old man who had no goals, no expectations, no hope, came from nowhere, had nobody, had nothing, and I couldn't keep my shit together. Every time, it seemed like every time I turned around, I was doing something to fuck up, and it was always me. I never made a scapegoat. I never had a scapegoat. It was always me making my own turmoil and then dragging Stephanie and now at this time Hunter along with. And so at this point, Stephanie was done at an end as she should be, and as I mean, that's a tiring long time to put up with somebody as she's believing in God this whole time.
right. So when I got home from Iraq is when we got married, and I thought, oh, we're married now, things will be different. I'm home from Iraq. We passed a really big test in our relationship. And 1 year into our marriage, and nothing had changed. He continued to drink a lot. He continued to use meth, and that's when I really was done. I packed his bags, and I wanted nothing to do with him. I was over this lifestyle of his, and that's when Jesse's salvation story kind of begins. But before we kind of go over, it's exactly where it begins. But so how did I get through it? Here's
where we're at.
Is praying. So I grew up Catholic, and I'll be honest, I learned nothing as a Catholic. I've learned more. I'm almost 35 years old, and I've learned more about true Christianity and the Bible and who Jesus really is in the past 5 years than I have the first 30 years. And so the first, from the time that me and Jesse met to the time that he was saved, it was an 8-year period. And through that, I was praying a lot, but I was praying for things like, oh Lord, please let Jesse stop drinking. Lord, let him stop doing drugs. Lord, let him stop flirting with girls. I was praying these things that were going to be beneficial to me. If he stopped drinking, I don't have to deal with him being drunk, and so they were very they were prayers towards him, but they were selfish prayers, because if those things magically went away, then my life would be easier. And it wasn't until I was ready to leave him. I had his bags packed. We had been married a year. We had been together 8 years. I was done.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reason that you don't pray for somebody's problem is because that's not it. The drinking.
That wasn't the problem.
The addiction, anything that goes along with it, girls, pornography, whatever goes along with a deplorable lifestyle, that's not the problem. Okay, that's just a product of the problem. The underlying problem is the sinful heart of men.
Which is where we started going to church. Jesse came home after I packed his bags and said, give me one more chance.
Again, I came home asking for one more chance. I had no idea that Steph was at the end of her rope. I had no idea that she had my stuff packed. I had no idea that I was in jeopardy of losing my family. But I was coming back home from a 9-day meth binge that I hadn't eaten and I hadn't slept. And in the Burger King parking lot, I had said to myself, and I had said to God, if you don't reveal yourself to me, I'm done. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I'm killing my family. I'm killing Stephanie. I'm hurting people around me that don't deserve it. And so if you don't show me, then I am done. And I meant it. I was a suicidal person anyways. And I very much meant it.
So we started going to church, and it wasn't your typical Catholic church like I was used to. We went to a non-denominational church. And in the only thing, we went to that church for a couple of years. we don't go to that church anymore, but only in that couple of years that we went to that church, one sermon stands out and will always forever be a pivot in our story. And it was about praying and fasting. And so the exact words that the pastor had said was, choose somebody who you love and pray and fast for them one day a week for a year and watch God move into that person's life. And so that's what I did. Every single Wednesday, I would not eat all day long. And instead of eating, the point of fasting is to give up something, but to replace that thing that you want with Jesus. And so I was just praying that God reveal himself to Jesse, that he would touch his heart and that he would save him and make him a saved man. So my prayers shifted. I stopped praying for those little things that were going to make my life easier and be less burdensome to me. And I started praying for the things that were going to save him. The only thing that matters was that Jesse knew who Jesus was and that Jesus revealed himself. And I started praying that every single Wednesday. I was so strict about it. I was Catholic about it. And slowly I started noticing changes in him. It was amazing.
The first changes happened all at once.
Yep.
Everything shifted. I stopped listening to rock and roll music. I stopped using meth immediately. I stopped drinking immediately. It took several months for me to stop smoking pot after that. And then it took, at that same time, then I stopped smoking cigarettes. It was a radical conversion from my old lifestyle to Christianity with no explanation. I abandoned all of my old friends for that time. I'm friends with everybody now. But
everything changed.
Everything changed.
Yep.
And it wasn't that, okay, so now we're going to this church, so we got to act moralistic.
No.
Right? Our lives just changed because Jesus was in them.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's why it changed. It wasn't because all of a sudden we didn't. When I first got saved, I sat down and I read the Bible and then I read it again and again and again and again and again and again and again. Right?
Yep.
I quit my job and I read the Bible
for a year.
All day long, every single day. All night long, every single night. All day long, every single day. John Piper. I know every one of his sermons.
Yep.
That's exactly what happened. I almost got sucked into TV evangelism, Creflo Dollar and TD Jakes and
doesn't matter.
The other heretics that are on TV talking about God wanting them to make millions of dollars. It's about being broken before God and realizing the necessity of who he is in your life. We realize this very much because we went through a very real devastating. You could talk about how dark and hard of times. You can watch movies about heroin addicts until you're a heroin addict and you're in the depths of your worst. You don't know what that degradation feels like. You don't know what that person is holding on to for their last hope. And so wives with unbelieving husbands, you don't know that you're not that person's light, that you're that person's hope. In the Bible, and I'll read this. Is this where we're going, right?
Yeah.
All right, so it says, to the rest I say, I, not the Lord, that if any brother has a wife who is an unbeliever and she consents to live with him, he should not divorce her. If any woman has a husband who is an unbeliever and he consents to live with her, she should not divorce him. For the unbelieving husband is made holy because of his wife, and the unbelieving wife is made holy because of her husband. Otherwise your children would be unclean, but as it is, they are holy. But if the unbelieving partner separates, let it be so. In such cases, the brother or sister is not enslaved. God has called you to peace. For how do you know, wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, husband, whether you will save your wife?
So coming from the believer who was with the non-believer, my biggest piece of advice would be to pray and fast for your spouse, but pray with purpose and pray for that your spouse's salvation, that Jesus actually touched that person's heart, your spouse's heart.
Right. And so then knowing the gospel and then understanding that the words of the gospel are life to the unbeliever that is amongst you. Okay, and that's not a spoken word type of a movement. that is actually biblical, that God says that the words, the gospel is life, that the word is life. Jesus is the word, and the word is life. In Philippians chapter 2, verse 14, it says, do everything without complaining or arguing, so that you may be blameless and pure children of God without fault in a crooked and perverse generation, in which you shine as lights in the world, as you hold forth the word of life, in order that I may boast on the day of Christ that I did not run or labor in vain. Your words are life. The gospel is life. Speak them in the presence of unbelievers and turn their hearts towards Christ. Be that shining light and be the representation of Jesus that he's called all of us to be. You're a reflection, a mirror, an imager, an image bearer, an ambassador. You speak for. So act like you speak for Christ.
Amen.
When you pray, pray with boldness. Pray with clarity. Pray knowing and believing that you have an almighty Father. You have an almighty God. That his love shadows all other loves that the world could ever offer you, whether you're a man or a woman. All right?
Amen.
So, yeah.
I think we got that question answered.
Yeah.